Andy Austin here. I'm up in the attic where I have been recording some more videos for the Ericksonian hypnotherapy course that I am putting onto the YouTube membership program. If this is of interest to you and you want to have a look at what we've already got on there, click on the memberships, or it might even be subscribe, it might even be join. That's what the button says. It says join. If you click on that, you can sign up and see what we've got. I'm doing a new video every week on Ericksonian hypnotherapy. Now, this is not just on how to do hypnosis. There's too much of that already. This is going to go into a lot more of how to do the therapeutic side of stuff. So how to organize the strategies by which you then utilize the Ericksonian approaches. If that is of interest to you, then click that join button and you'll see it's $1.99 a month. That's all. It's probably going to be the cheapest Ericksonian course you ever get to do. I'm also putting on live streams. I've got 3 on there at the moment. The first 2, do forgive me, I've never done a live stream before. It's getting better, and you can vote on the subjects that I talk about. At the moment, I'm trying to do 1 a week. I'm not doing 1 this week because it's Christmas, but they will resume next week. Now, today, this is the next chapter on The Rainbow Machine, Tales from a Neurolinguist's Journal by Andrew D. Austin. That's me. Now, this is the fairly short chapter. It's a little bit longer than the others, actually. This one's 4 pages, 4 whole pages. The brain hemispheres. And it's just a little bit about the differences between the left brain and the right brain, and where submodalities come in. They're a right brain phenomena, by the way. And the differences between some of the left brain functions and right brain functions. I'm just going to put the book down there. Now, this is the chapter that gets me criticised by certain characters from the NLP scene on social media. They've left me alone a little bit recently, mostly because I'm being nicer to everybody. The criticisms that get levelled come from a different place from where I come from in terms of neurology, and this is really what I want to explain for this chapter review. If you work in any neurological environment, which I have done, unlike my critics that I referred to before, you will see the evidence of the differences between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. When you have somebody who has a damage to the left hemisphere, so supposing they've had a massive stroke to the left hemisphere, and they're profoundly affected with aphasia or dysphasia, so lots of communication disorders in varying forms that can take. Some people, it's expressive dysphasia that's the problem. They talk a nonsense, but they understand the spoken word. They just can't really generate it in a meaningful way. Some people can express it relatively well, but receptively, when they hear you speak, it sounds like a foreign language to them. They don't understand. And then some people have both. It's a complete aphasia. So they're not able to understand what they hear, and they can't produce anything particularly meaningful. And there's lots of variations and ratios on that. Now, when you work in a neurological environment and you're working with those kind of patients and you see corresponding damage in the body and the ability of the body to function, so left brain damage results in right hemisphere, right body deficits and vice versa, and if we damage the left hemisphere, then the emotional right hemisphere is no longer held in check. So not only do they have aphasia, they become hyper emotional. If we go the other way around, where the left hemisphere is still intact, but the right hemisphere is damaged, they become less emotional. They become almost like monotone in their emotions and in their expression. You see lots and lots and lots of variations. Depending on also if the visual cortex is damaged or the frontal lobes are damaged, you see these things happen. And you cannot mistake it when you know what it is you're looking at. The problem is the critics of that neurological model have never worked in those environments. They are reviewing medical literature, usually by headline only. They're not actually seeing clinical examples. And they're aware of modern day brain imaging studies that basically don't support the observational model that we will see in a neurological unit. We know that the brain doesn't actually have the organization that it appears to have according to what happens when you damage it. That when we put people into functional MRI scanners, so you can see what is actually happening as it's happening, the left-right brain and all that kind of stuff doesn't really hold up to scrutiny so well. So it's a bit of a problem. And of course, modern day literature and reviews are written from that scientific basis. Now, when we have people who've only read literature and mostly the headlines, and they've never seen clinical examples firsthand, they take on a particular view of how the brain works, and also basically how the brain works according to the theoretical scientific models, as opposed to what actually you can see in front of your nose. There's other stuff as well. A lot of people talk about neuroplasticity. This is a very common thing, especially in the NLP scene and people who have a desire that the brain can heal everything. The brain can heal the body. The mind can heal the body. Really? Love to see evidence of it, because I'm not seeing any. Seeing lots of claims, just not seeing the evidence. But people believe in this neuroplasticity. So you can damage the brain and the brain can heal itself. Yes, I know there's been research papers published. There's books and volumes on Amazon. You can put those links. I have actually read some of them. I know it might come as a shock. But it's funny how those 1 in a million counterexamples, when people do make miraculous recoveries, they're the ones that people write up. They don't write up the 999 who actually went on to have a very miserable existence despite all of the interventions, all of the rehabilitation, all of the expertise that was put their way. The literature, the publications, the magazines, the Facebook posts, the feel-good Pollyanna mentality of modern day pop psychology therapists, they focus only on the success stories, which are the minority. They don't focus on the majority. They go for the counterexample. But because they don't have clinical experience or clinical knowledge, they assume that one thing they read in that headline review that circulated on Facebook, but they never actually clicked the link to read it, they assume that's the generalization rather than being the exception. And this is one of the frustrations I have with therapists, especially from the NLP scene, who have gone on to becoming, rather than just doing NLP, they've moved into doing therapy and change, and now they're healers. That's the latest one. They're all psychics and healers now. It's just the latest trend to jump in on. Everyone's a fucking healer. But the evidence of the healing is largely happening in their imagination. Now, people do recover. There's a famous case that's written up in the neurological literature. I saw this patient myself, and this was a young man who had lost virtually the entire left hemisphere. Oh dear God, you can imagine that's a horrific injury, and he looked a bit odd. But actually, the deficits we would expect that child to possess, he didn't have, at least not at the time that I saw him. And so that's a famous case that's been written up because he's the counter-example to the generalization that's true. The reason these medical and neurological generalizations are made is because they're true in the majority of instances. But it's the anomalies, it's the counter-examples that get written up and then in turn get overgeneralized by people who are experts in communication and overgeneralization, distortion and deletions. So you will find these. Now, here's the other issue I just wanted to go. I hinted on about neuroplasticity and the brain can heal itself. What we saw in the neuro departments, I worked in 3 different neuro departments. In the neuro departments that I worked in, what we saw, we would call recovery and healing. But the NLPers out there call it neuroplasticity. And essentially, because now we call it neuroplasticity, we can now begin to think and generalize that actually you can train the brain, because we know that when people lose their sight, the other parts of their brain take over and they map the world out kinesthetically and auditorily, and the brain adapts, and that's proof of neuroplasticity. Or that's just recovery and adaptation. But neuroplasticity has been elevated to become this mythical, magical, wondrous thing we can invoke to support our notions that everyone can be healed. It's just that the doctors don't know what they're doing. The doctors are useless because they haven't done the NLP training. There's so much of that goes on. Now, I know you watching this video, you're not one of those people. You don't say those things. I know that. But I'm talking about the others out there. Just do a quick scan on Facebook. Go and have a look at the people who don't like me and look at what they're writing regarding neuroplasticity and so forth. It is absolutely shameful, the level of ignorance that is being demonstrated, but also the level of just not really understanding anything and offering the false hope. Because now here's the thing. If I have a brain injury and I don't recover, it's because I haven't used the right technique, as opposed to actually this is a statement on how bad the damage is. Because in the Pollyanna world of the neuroplasticity, everyone can be recovered therapist, there is no such thing as something that can't be healed. And this is utterly unrealistic. I know I've banged on about this before, and it is my regular rant. When I worked in neurology, I did have permission to bring in NLPers, because at the time, I mean, this is in the 90s, I was very, very into my NLP. And I was active on a lot of the forums that existed back then on Usenet, on the old psychology NLP forums and various others that were around. And I was regularly inviting people who were making lots of neurological claims, because I didn't know a lot of the claims back then were false. I was a believer. I was still in the field. I was still one of them. But I was inviting these alleged NLP trainers to come into our department to demonstrate what they could do. And I had a room at the hospital that they gave us. I had a number of patients who were quite willing to volunteer. I had a number of clinicians who were also willing to come in and assess and all the rest of it. We had the full setup. All you had to do was contact me, and we could make you famous if you could no one ever contacted me. Do you know what? No one, no matter how many times I offered to the people who were making these claims, come over to our hospital, come and show us what's happening, no one ever took me up on it. Now, nowadays, if I was to make that claim, everyone knows I'm trying to catch them out. That wasn't what I was doing back then. It was an honest and open and genuine invitation. Because I think when you ask people to put the money where the mouth is, they're really not able to demonstrate it. And I think this is why there's a distinct lack of video of a lot of these claims. Now, NLPers especially, and I'm picking on the NLPers because they have the neuro part. And because they have the neuro part of NLP, that then makes them an expert on neurology. And when I hear NLPers talking about neurology, I cringe. Now, my knowledge is not very much. It's not very good, to be honest. It could be a lot better, because I don't work in those areas anymore. It's not a primary area of my study. But I have worked with absolute experts. I've worked with brain surgeons, and brain surgery nurses who worked there for 20 plus years. So I used to work around with people who are absolute experts in these things. I know what expertise looks like. I know what neurological knowledge and expertise looks like. And what I'm not seeing is that coming from the NLP world. I'm seeing people gaming it. They're repeating what they hear other people say. They're having these Pollyanna claims of healing and ability and how the brain can be so transformational. And no one really knows how the brain works anyway, do they? I hear those things being said quite a lot. And I think it's time to stop. There was a time, especially late 90s, when the NLP world and other disciplines too, they got hold of the whole thing about the limbic system. The limbic system, and then very quickly the amygdala, became the focus of everybody's attention. Everything was explained by the amygdala. And then, about 10 years ago now, it was mirror neurons. Mirror neurons, depending on which literature you read. Does it have an E? Does it not have an E? Who knows? Mirror neurons were the explanation for everything. Mirror neurons were identified in macaque monkeys. And lots of papers were written because it was a big breakthrough in neurology that when the monkey see, monkey do. So monkey sees other monkey do a thing, little cells in its frontal lobes light up as though the monkey itself is doing it. It's how we learn to imitate behaviors, how we learn to acquire behaviors, by observing it. Anyone who's trained dogs, anyone who's trained a chicken will know that this is a useful thing. And then mirror neurons became the explanation for absolutely everything. As though mirror neurons were a structure that no one had previously identified in the brain. If that's what you may want to go back and actually read the literature, actually read the papers of what mirror neurons are, because it's not quite what everyone used to say it was on Facebook. I can tell you, it was not. I've read the reason. Anyway, mirror neurons became the explanation for everything. And do you notice that no one talks about them anymore? And that kind of fashion has passed, as there'll be another discovery that people jump on. And whatever the buzzword that comes in, practitioners jump on that, and they understand a little bit, but not very much. And then that becomes their explanation for absolutely everything. Now, here's my recommendation as I'm ranting here. You can lose a lot of the ignorance that you have, because people don't know what they don't know. And so people often will think what they do know is the totality of what is known. So I used to hear people used to say to me, but no one really knows how the brain works anyway, do they? Really? Well, I think there's a lot of people out there who know a lot more than you might think they actually know. Just saying. You can go and work in these areas. There are community-based charities, there are organisations that specialise in supporting people with brain injuries. Headway in the UK is one of the leading charities. They do absolutely superb work. If you just go to their website, I'll bring that up on the screen here. Go to Headway. Every country has a variation on this. And community support, there are day centres and whatever. They're always looking for volunteers. Now, if you're somebody who believes you have a lot of neurological knowledge, or an NLPer, and you'd like to talk about it, but you've not ever had any experience of being around people with brain injury, go and get some voluntary work. Hospitals are always looking out for volunteers. Okay, admittedly, neurosurgical departments are usually closed. They're usually named bases only, so you can't necessarily go and volunteer in those places. But there's lots of rehabilitation units, lots of community care projects. There's lots of them out there. Go and get yourself some clinical experience by which to have a real-world experience to attribute some of the knowledge that you have gained, some of the insights that you have. You can actually have a real-world example of it, rather than just relying on Facebook headlines that are then shared around. And hopefully, some people out there will be cured of this Pollyanna, everyone can be healed. Hey, because I'm a healer, come and see me for my high fee. As always, do please use the comment section and click the like button. It's always appreciated. See you in the next video.